This is The Speaking Show. I'm David Newman, and you're tuned in to the #1 podcast for speakers, consultants, and experts who want to speak more profitably. Well, strap in, hang on. This is going to win the #1 most eclectic episode. I am here with my old buddy, Skip Shuda, co-founder of Soulful Cannabis and just overall fascinating Renaissance man. Welcome, Skip. Great to be talking to you.
Thank you, David. It's so good to catch up with you after all this time. So it's good to see your face.
So you and I met many, many moons ago when your professional adventure was Team and a Dream. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But even that, I don't think, was your first entrepreneurial venture. Talk a little bit about your professional journey and some of the stops along the way, and then we'll kind of dig into each chapter as it unfolded.
All right. Sounds good. Well, let's see. I started my career back in the Stone Age when they were using the tablets and, but I actually came into the world as a technologist, the computer scientist out of University of Delaware and then Villanova for my master's. And I always have been drawn to startups and entrepreneurial ventures. So I started with a company called Rabbit Software when I first got out of school. They were a startup. I subsequently worked with a medical imaging company called Eidetic Knowledge Systems. Then I went and founded Destiny Software in the mid-90s. We started building online banking systems. We built one of the world's first online banking system for Bank of America, rode that whole wave of the internet boom, crashed on the dot-com beach in 2002. And that's when I started Team and a Dream, where I was working with entrepreneurs. I also started teaching at the Wharton Small Business Development Center then and did Team and a Dream for about 8 years. And that morphed into ultimately Philly Marketing Labs, which I co-founded with a guy named Bashar Ajouti. Bashar is still running Philly Marketing Labs as the CEO. I'm a partner in that company and still do some consulting work. So that's a digital marketing firm. But about 2015, so about 5 years ago, I got the itch to start something new and strike out in a new direction. So I started Green Rush Advisors, which is my cannabis consulting company. Put together some courses there, actually met some entrepreneurs who were applying for a permit. I invested. We all worked together on this application and we won one of the first medical marijuana dispensary permits in Pennsylvania. I operated for 18 months as the chief operating officer there, and then left that venture and started Soulful Cannabis, which I'm sporting the shirt today. Soulful Cannabis is a nonprofit. I co-founded with two good friends, Jason Mitchell and Julia Klein, to help the cannabis industry really be the best version of itself. And we've been doing a lot of work with caregivers, trying to get medical marijuana, particularly now that COVID has hit, trying to get cannabis out to really sick patients who cannot make it into a dispensary or who are immunocompromised and can't get into a dispensary. We're working on corporate social responsibility initiatives. We're working on education and events. So we partner with the industry players and they sponsor our work and then we try to provide it free to the public. So those are some of the business elements. Along the way, I did some shamanic practices also about 5 years ago. I think that sort of expanded my mind to consider cannabis as a viable industry for me to enter. And then I've also been working really for the last 10 years, but more actively over the last 4 or 5 years with Transition Town Media. Transition Town Media is a nonprofit organization in Media Borough here outside of Philadelphia. And we're doing all kinds of good stuff. I'm particularly active with this Circle of Aunts and Uncles, where we try to provide capital to underserved communities or underfunded communities. So we're trying to help those communities get a leg up and provide them low interest loans as well as business support and guidance. And then I also started a local farm group to try to use some of the lots in the area to grow some produce for the local food banks. because we feel like there's probably going to be a lot of people who are needing extra help at this time. So those are just a handful of the things. I got my finger in too many pies right now, David.
This is what I was saying, is that like this is going to be a far-ranging, fascinating, multi-layered enchilada of a discussion. I'm just channeling our listeners, and I'm sure people are thinking, how does he keep this all going? So just from a personal focus, personal productivity standpoint, okay, yeah. I'm Skip Shuda. I wake up no matter how early, and I'm sure you get up early. How do I know what I'm focusing on any given hour, any given day, any given week? I mean, how do you sort of parse out these projects and priorities? I'm sure you've got meetings out the wazoo. I'm sure you've got business development work that you're doing and outreach and with stakeholders in the nonprofits and all of these different areas. Just how do you manage your daily and weekly focus?
Yeah, so I put together a little framework for myself that I think really gets me to a comfortable place, because all the work that I'm doing is stuff that really speaks to my soul, right? And hence soulful cannabis. I think the shamanic work that I did, I think kind of cracked me open to really saying, I need to connect with what it is I want to be doing in the world. And fortunately, because of all the work I had done before, I was given, I think, a little more financial independence and latitude to pursue whatever it is that spoke to me, whether it was financially rewarding or not. So first rule, no assholes. It's like those people, some people have called them energy vampires, whatever it is. There's certain people that are going to just kind of keep coming back and trying to pull your attention, but they're not really aligned with what you're trying to accomplish in the world. So for me, I don't deal with those folks now. I just sort of learn to say no and say no, thank you, and move on from there. I like to remain agile. So you might remember I was an Aikido practitioner. So I have my black belt in Aikido, and I try to practice Aikido in life, which is really about sort of going with the flow and feeling the energy of the moment. I read a book called The Alchemist, and they talked about pay attention to the omens. So things that sort of shoot up, and it's like all of a sudden there's, you get these weird serendipitous connections, and you're like, oh, well, you know what? Maybe I need to pay a little more attention to this person knew that person who knew that person who knew this person that I'm working with now. Like, maybe there's a there. So I try to follow those sorts of energies. It's really about following energy, if you will. And then I think also do what you love, minimize the rest, say no when necessary, and then having compassion and really an understanding. A lot of people are struggling right now. There's a huge transition that we're going through as a species. So I try to have a lot of understanding, compassion, and working with people and try to meet them where they are. So that allows me to really manage my day well. Sometimes it gets a little overwhelming, but one of the things that came to me in my shamanic practice is the power animal of the turtle. So I had this vision. I do these journeys, just sort of like guided meditations, if you will. And I was following this turtle, and he's going up this hill. And then we get to the top of the hill, and it's like down the hill, and there's another mountain and another mountain and another mountain. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to be following this turtle forever. And I got, all twisted up inside and tense and nervous about that. And the turtle turned around to me and looked at me, and it said, you feel that hit in your stomach? And I said, yes. It said, that's your first lesson. And that became my power animal, because it's like, you know what? Don't get tied up. And I got my lesson. I was like 5 minutes into the meditation, and my lesson was there. I was all worried that this is going to take forever, but it didn't. It was done. So I just let things unfold at the pace they're going to unfold, and then go to the next thing and try to stay fully present, and then move to the next thing. And the stuff flows over to the next day. Oh, well,
Let's talk more about this shamanic practice, because I think people listening might not even know what that means, the word shaman, etc.
Okay.
Explain that to us like Denzel Washington would say, like I'm a 5-year-old.
Okay. Well, there are lots of ways to come to a shamanic practice. A shamanic practice, really, for me, what it's helping you do is try to unlock your subconscious and sort of, our ego puts a lot of layers in place to try to regulate how we do things. And a lot of times we are servants to our ego. So for me, a lot of what the shamanic practice does is moves us beyond our ego and gets us in touch with our true self, where our passion lies and where our sense of service to the world really lies. Now, there are lots of ways to get there. Some people use psychedelics. My first ceremony was using something called ayahuasca, which is a drink that comes out of South American traditions, and it opens you up, and then you have a shaman who takes you through this process. The first shaman I had didn't even speak English. He only spoke Spanish and Japanese. But the experience that I had opened me up to all the possibilities of learning from my subconscious. Now, since then, I have studied with a group called the Shift Network, where they have a bunch of practitioners, a woman named Sandra Ingerman, who uses drumming, and that gets you into sort of a transition state. So you listen to this drumming, and then she guides you through the meditation, and you can travel to different worlds, and there are power animals. So there's a kind of a mystical, magical element to it, and it really opens up your creativity. Another guy named Michael Stone was actually a management consultant before. So he brings in sort of the meeting of the business world with the shamanic world. And then a third one I'll mention is a guy named Robert Moss, who uses dreams. So he encourages you to pay attention to your dreams and then find that subliminal state where you're kind of transitioning between sleep and wakefulness, and using that as the entry point into your shamanic journeys. So through that process, I've developed a whole cadre of power animals and spirits and ancestors who all help me. And now I practice with, my teacher is Amy Isakov, aka Amy Mermaid, and she teaches through the Pachacuti Mesa tradition, which was started by a guy named Don Oscar Miro Questeda. And Don Oscar teaches this Pachacuti Mesa tradition, which comes out of Peruvian traditions and uses an altar, they call it a mesa, and you organize different elements, power elements on there, and it's supposed to be, it's like a game board to access your shamanic world. So I don't know how a 5-year-old would respond to that, but
that's really cool. So a shaman, just so people are familiar with the source term, right? A shaman is like a wise man or a spiritual guide, or how would you describe that term, shaman?
Yeah, I think there's a wise man, spiritual guide, medicine man. I mean, they say that shamanic practices are actually the oldest spiritual discipline on the planet. So they found evidence of shamanic practices as far away as, in Siberia, in South America, in Africa. That goes back 10, 20, 30,000 years. So this is really an ancient tradition, and it's been an oral tradition. And now, like with Don Oscar's work, he's infused a lot of modern study of anthropology and psychobiology and those sorts of disciplines to actually kind of supercharge these shamanic practices.
You know what strikes me? I think I would love to tap into your take on this, because I think just having been friends and observing you in multiple roles and multiple businesses, you've always had this layer of study, this sort of meta level to everything that you do. So early on, maybe not when we first met, but certainly early on, you were very into holacracy,
yes.
Right? And that was just a way of operating in the world and a way of looking at your business and looking at your life. So you have your business interests and your business pursuits. And then you also have this other area of sort of intertwined personal and professional development. So as you're a practitioner, you're also a student. And then, of course, as you're a student, you're also teaching others and bringing some of that into the business practice.
Yeah.
How does that constant study and that personal professional development intertwining, how does that feed your soul? How does that feed the businesses that you're involved in?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think a lot of those things like holacracy, of course, I studied Ken Wilber's work, integral theory, which is kind of a map of human consciousness and experience, the Aikido work. All of those disciplines, all of those studies, I think have really been internalized over time. And so they've merged together and meshed together to kind of really influence the way that I operate day to day. So I still use holacracy principles, like, for example, in all of my organizations. So at Philly Marketing Labs, they use a version of holacracy. At Soulful Cannabis, we use a version of holacracy. I still practice Aikido, some of the, the sword work and the Jo work, and occasionally get together with my old club, not as often as I'd like. So all of those things inform the way that I'm being in the day-to-day world. But my focus has been, it's sort of, and a part of this, I think, is also what I'm calling the vortex that we're in now with COVID-19 and the Black Lives Matter and social injustice and systemic racism. All of these moving parts has led me to become kind of hyper-focused on hyper-local focus. Like really working, for me, the really rich work right now is in my garden, in my neighborhood farm plot that we're trying to raise produce, working with an uncle who's just recovered from cancer and trying to help him get back on his feet, working with family members who are struggling with issues of anxiety or depression. So I'm doing a lot of that kind of really deep personal work with individuals. And I have a couple of, I'll call them clients, but, in a ways they're like partners looking at early stage businesses where they're trying to build a new generation of business, a new kind of business, particularly in the hemp and cannabis space. But I'm open to all kinds of businesses and really looking for those kinds of partners that allow me to bring all those tools to bear. But it feels less like I'm using specific tools now, and it's just sort of part of who I am and the way I sort of operate day to day now. It's kind of, you know what I mean? Sort of gets baked in.
Hey, this interview is a real moneymaker. If you're serious about ramping up your reach and revenue as a speaker, trainer, or expert, book a confidential speaker strategy call with our team. The link is doitmarketing.com/call. It will be the most valuable 45 minutes you invest in your speaking-driven business. Speaking of value, let's get back to the show. Well, and you brought up another area that I'm very much excited to talk to you about, which is other people and collaboration. Because back when you and I were doing some things together, we were cooking up all kinds of crazy ideas about having like a super agency and kind of this, league of extraordinary gentlemen, and a few women were in there too, extraordinary super women and supermen.
The super agency, I remember that. We had a couple of domain names like that.
Yeah. We had the slide deck, we had everything going on. We had the meetings, we had lunch with people, but you seem to be very open and very willing to trust others, from what I see, fairly quickly, and that has paid off more often than it has harmed you. Am I correct?
That's true. It is sort of the nature of this beast. And I'm really kind of a startup guy. So very early stage, the ideation phase, the let's get organized, let's start moving things. And then as quickly as I can, hand over the operations to someone who can take it and run with it. And really, if there's somebody who is pushing to kind of drive in a certain direction, I'm going to step aside. I got a fortune cookie a couple of years ago and had a conversation related to this in the cannabis business that I was working in. And the fortune cookie said, change is possible, but you cannot push the river. So if I'm working with a river of energy, then I can help try to influence the river or the direction, or maybe build a dam to hold the river back. But I cannot change that river. That river is going where that river is going. And for me, that realization leads to a form of non-attachment, so that I can let that go and let it blossom. So with Philly Marketing Labs, I mean, I'm sure if you were ever to talk to my friend Bashar, and he's a very interesting guy, is very driven and incredibly smart about digital marketing. Well, Bashar and I, 6 years ago, were locking horns over how do we want to move the company forward. And I was like, look, if you're willing to take it and own it and make it yours, I'll support you and I'll step back. And at that time, as I said, I got involved with the cannabis industry. So it worked out really well. And he's done wonderful things with this company, kept a holacracy. We can, get together periodically and have strategic conversations about things. And, and now I'm a shareholder in a company that's doing well. And I have a couple of clients as well that I work with. But mostly he's taking that and running with that. And I've done that with a lot of people. Sometimes I've sort of considered myself a little bit of a CEO whisperer, because I've had so many people who started with me as interns or started in very early positions and now are running their own ventures, their own companies. And Bashar started with me as an intern out of Temple. He was in the entrepreneurship program. I also got Yasmin Mustafa, who's running a successful company in Philadelphia, and Brian Meinzer and Lucinda Holt, who's a very successful entrepreneurial CEO, started with me as a CEO way back in the mid-90s at Destiny. So I've had the pleasure and opportunity to work with a lot of these people as they were blossoming into that leadership role. And that's really rewarding.
No, I'm sure it is. I was going to say that for folks listening, if you ever apply for an internship with Skip, be careful, because you'll end up as the CEO of something.
There you go.
That really speaks highly of the way that you invest in people, the way you invest your energy, your wisdom, your generosity, and even the way that you give up control. I mean, we talk about interns, and for a lot of people, intern means, hey, get the coffee and put the binders together for the meeting. Your interns, almost from day one, you treat as way bigger and better than most internship, because you give them important work. It might not be, you're not literally giving them CEO work on day one, but you're giving them a lot of responsibility, and you expect quite a lot of them in return. Does that try your patience, or how do you hand over such fantastic developmental opportunities to all the folks on your staff, but especially this intern thing that I want to talk about for a minute, without either pulling your hair out or without overwhelming some of them?
The phrase I always use is give people big shoes to fill, and they'll surprise you. And oftentimes we'll fill those shoes. Not always, but oftentimes they will. So the things that I look for, first of all, is obviously they have to have an aptitude for whatever role it is I'm providing to them, and a passion for it. So if they have the aptitude and the passion, those are the important ingredients to saying, okay, I'm going to give you these big shoes. Take this project, take this area. I don't want to run it anymore because I have other ideas. I want to go and pursue these, or I want to expand the organization on these fronts. I would love it if you would take this and own it. Okay. And then what I do is I give them the ability and the support. So, we put the systems in place. We make sure that there's regular check-ins and reporting. And then you have to create space for those personal conversations, because they are going to fail. They are going to make mistakes along the way. And you want those to be positive learning experiences for them, as opposed to, something that's soul crushing. I once worked with someone who said to me, I remember we were in a meeting and I said, the interns are waiting for me. We're going to sit down and have a meeting about some kind of research project, whatever. And this person said, they're interns. They can sharpen pencils for all I care. And I was just like, and I just hated to hear that, because it's like, Well, they're also human beings and they're professionals who are, or they're trying to become professionals, so let's realize their potential and not focus on, sort of their limited experience. So that's always served me really well. I've always found some really good people that way. And, people that were overlooked by others. So that's usually worked out very well.
Super quick commercial break. Isn't this interview amazing? If you'd like to get more ideas on how to start or grow your speaking business fast, pop over to our free training at doitmarketing.com/webinar. I have a very interesting personal twist on my next question because I just had this experience and I'm happy to tell you a little bit about it.
Okay.
I think guys like you and me, our parents and our relatives and people who care about us, on some foundational level, they have no idea what we're doing. They just have no idea, especially when you come with a portfolio of things that you're doing. It's like, so Skip, are you a gardener now? Have you become a farmer? I thought you were a marketing guy and now we're doing the cannabis. And how do you explain this at the family picnics, Thanksgiving, Uncle Joe's birthday? How do you explain what you do for your family? And do they on some level get it, or do they on some level just don't get it really? And they think you're, a nice man doing good work and they have no idea what it is.
Yeah, I think it depends on the individual. Different people are at different places. So I usually say I have 1,000 projects going on. I have a portfolio of projects, which is in a lot of ways the way I look at it is I have this portfolio of activities. I mean, on the personal side, for example, I'm also building a primitive campsite on some property I own in upstate Pennsylvania. And I want to have that as a place where I can invite family to come. Insofar as I can define or share some of the projects that I'm working on with them, and they can sort of say, oh, that's kind of cool, I get that. Or some of them will say, I hate camping. And it's like, okay, well, next topic. So I think for me, it's a lot of it has to do with meeting them where they are. Maybe you say I have 1,000 things going on, a portfolio of projects. I'm running a nonprofit in the cannabis space. I'm working on a private campsite over at my mom's old property, and of course I still have Philly Marketing Labs going. Then see what reaction they get. If they're like, yeah, what are you drinking? It's okay. Obviously I didn't pique their interest. I don't usually even bring up the shamanism at the family picnic too often. I have one or two cousins who are interested in that kind of thing, but for the most part, that's not really a big picnic conversation. So choose your audience. You choose your audience and choose your topics based on the audience you have.
Yeah, for sure.
What do you find in those situations?
Well, I fall into the trap, right? Because the impulse is, well, let me explain this to you. And I try and explain it, and they just look more and more confused. Like they probably feel they knew more before I opened my mouth. So you're helping people with marketing. You're like, yeah, okay. That's like, we're in the right universe. We're in the right stadium. And you're helping them be better speakers. Well, no, not really. In fact, I do everything except that, right? I help them be better marketers and salespeople and make more money and charge more fees. But that brings me to my next question for you, which you said a few moments ago. I think you said a few moments ago that in some of these ventures, you are not primarily money driven. Did I hear that correctly? That money is not job one.
Yeah.
So where does money, because you say, I'm a startup guy, I'm an entrepreneurial guy. Most startup folks, they're already thinking of the exit. They're already thinking, hey, I'm going to be bought out by Amazon. I'm going to be bought out by company X. I have these big dreams with big bags of cash in my mind. Where does that fall into your value system, and how and where do you feel that's an appropriate thing to wake up in the morning and go, okay, I really got to generate some revenue, not from a selfish place, but for the team, for the cause, for the nonprofit.
Well, it's definitely an issue, for example, with Soulful Cannabis, right? Because it's a nonprofit, and if we don't have the funding to run the programs, then we're not going to be able to continue on running the program. So I heard one person once described it, it's like the money is like the blood, right? You have to have it. You're not going to, in our culture, in our society, you're not going to survive as an organization without having that money flowing through your system. Now, some people are very growth oriented and, sort of maximizing profit and that kind of thing, and that's fine. That's not so in terms of focus, my focus is the mission first and foremost. So our mission, for example, at Soulful Cannabis, education, anti-stigma stuff, access to patients, access to equitable opportunities for people in disadvantaged communities, and corporate social responsibility, right? That's where I put most of my energy. But our little marketing circle has spent time putting together fundraising letters and putting together a tier of sponsorships. And I have a couple conversations. In fact, I got an email from a friend who reviewed the letter and the sponsorship and made a couple of suggestions. And she's offering to sit down with me and talk about ways we might better get the message out. And she has a sponsorship opportunity for me. So I'll follow up with that. And later this week, we'll spend time on that. But I can't get myself wrapped around the axle, just focused on that, because then it sucks all the fun out of what I'm doing and it sucks all the energy out. And then I can't lead effectively and I can't deliver services effectively.
Yeah, that's a great insight. Well, and you get those other parts right, and then the money will typically take care of itself. Not to be, too flaky about that, but that it almost always happens. Like, do your work, serve the people that you're meant to serve, do the amazing work that you're meant to do.
Right.
And the revenue is a reflection of that.
That's right. And, when I'm working with entrepreneurs too, they can have their objectives set as they want. I just want to make sure that they're also taking care of their other stakeholders. Are you looking out for your employees? Are you looking out for your partners? Are you looking out for, obviously, your customers? You have to make sure they're all part of so I'm going to bring my frameworks to their business, and then they're going to drive towards the goals that are most important for them. So, and then, there may be some residuals that flow my way from that work.
Right, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, as we're wrapping it up, I've got two final questions for you. The final question is, where can people get connected and stay connected to you and Soulful Cannabis and all of your other wonderful projects that you're doing? But the second to last question, before we get to that, as we're talking about a portfolio career and having all these wonderful pursuits and areas of study and areas of work, if people were to take one central concept away on how they can do this in their business and start to get this wonderful eclectic mix of projects going in their world, what do you hope that core concept around the portfolio career might be?
Well, I think for me, the way that it really developed organically. And what happened is I committed myself to an organic path, meaning, when we started Soulful Cannabis together with my partners, Jason and Julia, I tried not to have too much attachment to an outcome, to a specific outcome. So I learned along the way. And then as I was doing that work, new opportunities started to show up. So, over the last 2 years, I probably have been approached by, 2 or 3 hemp businesses a week, or CBD businesses a week. I get a lot of those. But more recently, through a strategic partner, I met a couple of women that I'm now having a deeper conversation about that business. So now I'm spending time on that portfolio. A lot of those other conversations just fell by the wayside because we weren't really aligned. 1 or 2 of them, I actually did some consulting work with them. But you know what? It just didn't feel right for me and it didn't feel right for them. So I would say it was really an organic process. I know what my values are. I'm very interested in social justice. I'm very interested in re-engineering the world that we're in so that we can all be in a better place together. So all of this chaos that's surrounding us right now is opportunity for me to look at potential projects to connect with. And then, so out of the blue, over the weekend, I got a call from a guy who works with a farm group who wants to look at the way the Pennsylvania law can be restructured so that it's more equitable, it's more just, it's more available to small business people. That's something that fits right into my wheelhouse. So I'm like, okay, let me get my posse together. Let's set up a call and follow that. So the organic approach has served me very well.
I love that. All right. Now, how can people get connected and stay connected to more Skip Shuda brilliance and your latest and greatest projects?
The three websites, soulfulcannabis.com. I like URLs. I've always told entrepreneurs, I like URLs where you can just say the name and you don't have to spell it all out. That's always good. You can find me at greenrushadvisors.com, although I will say advisors with an ORS at the end. And then affiliatemarketinglabs.com is the digital marketing work that I do. So those are all places that you can find me. I will send you some links, David, to put in the meeting notes for some of the shamanic work. And, we talked about holacracy and, things like that. So people can do a little more research on some of those things.
I love
down the road. I really appreciate the opportunity to catch up with you, friend. I wasn't quite sure what we would talk about because I have my fingers in too many pies, but you've given me a lot of energy and ideas. I actually have some book ideas I'm thinking about based on your inspiration here. So thank you for that.
I love it. All right. So all of those eclectic links will be right under this episode at thespeakingshow.com, and check everything out. Connect with Skip, all the URLs we talked about, and a couple of extra bonuses about the shamanic work and some other things that you're interested in and up to. And so great catching up with you. We have to have you back on the show as each of these starts to take fruition and blossom, if you will.
Yeah, would love that. That sounds great, David.
Well, that wraps up another episode of The Speaking Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on iTunes. Subscribe. Tell a friend. Go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thespeakingshow.com. See you next time.